Boom. We're live. Don't want updates on my computer right now. Remind me tomorrow. Hello, how are you? What up? How is everybody? Can everybody hear me all right? Cool. I'm doing all right. Thank you for asking. So, here we are again. I think I'm going to be calling these little things Q&As with J, Q&A with J, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, it's another one of these things, these evening chats that we have. So, hello, the gentleman 39. Good. I'm glad we have an approval for the name. What up, Get Fix? How's it going, buddy? Quillum, hello. So, no, I did not get Blink yet. I am currently reading a couple of books at the moment. Um, I'm in the middle. I just started this one. It's on criminal profiling. It's actually a textbook. This is quite interesting. And then I've been trying to get through. This lovely book, The Origins and History of Consciousness, and also kind of skimming through the monographs again. So I have a stack of books that keeps getting bigger. Everything's good. Just came back from a trip to Orlando. Oh, that's cool. Hope your trip to Orlando went well. This seems like a really short stream delay. Well, I did just get a new Wi-Fi router, so maybe the Wi-Fi is a little bit faster. It has been a while, gentleman 39. I have been doing fairly well. That is my says, what's up? Uh, currently my leaky ceiling, but we'll see if that remains. Hit that like button. Thank you for the free advertisement. Francis K asks, do you think it's acceptable for a crime and mystery novel to focus more on the observations and deductions than on the characters and the storylines and try to write stories like Sherlock? Well, I'd say that, of course, with any art or pursuit, you want to look back to successful things of the past to see what is so compelling about those things. Why do the Sherlock Holmes stories last so long? I think a big part of that is the focus on the methodology. There is character development, but it's very much in between the lines, in the original stories. You feel like you're watching Sherlock. And when you're watching a person, of course, pulling back our pursuits as deductionists. When you're watching a person and you're not trying to read them, let's say, you don't you feel a bit of a distance. And that's how it feels like with Holmes. But you feel his progression as well through the stories, and you feel like you get to know him. But the focus is always on the methodology. So if you're trying to write stories like that, sure, I don't think it's too wrong to focus on the crime and the deductions and the methods so much. But you don't want to skip over your characters. What got you into deduction? A lot of things. Mainly wanting to be able to understand people more and also be able to, through that, be more capable in general so that I could be more helpful to people, I suppose. So, yeah, that's the short answer. How many friends do I have? Well, there was a point in my life where you could count them on one hand with fingers to spare. At this point, I don't really count my friends. I have a lot of acquaintances for sure, but as far as close friends, I don't know that I have too many. But counting is, I think, unnecessary. The friends that I do have are good ones. Yes, I am a psychology major in university. First year student. The university's name is the University of West Florida. Have you ever worked on any cases, officially or not? I've certain, yeah. I mean, I guess you could call it working on case. I don't like to use that terminology because it sounds more fantastical than it is. I've looked into cases, cold cases, local cases. It's not like I've actually done anything to further the investigation, but I've looked into things as sort of an exercise. Oh, I see where your loyalties lie, Quillim. Fred is here, but you might be here to see him, but maybe he's not here to see you. Did you ever think about that? I want to think about it sometime. OG Sherlock Holmes was detective for a college. Not sure what you mean by that. You guys are being rather quiet on the questions end of this. I don't really have many answers for you. Have I always been interested in psychology? Well, I don't think it. I've been interested in a lot of things in my life, and psychology is merely the most academic route that is closest to deduction that I can think of, and it opens up doors for future pursuits that I have for deduction. So, have I always been interested in psychology? I think to an extent, I've always been interested in studying in people, understanding people. But as far as studying psychology per se, that's a relatively new interest for me. I've been looking into the dark room method for memory training. Are you familiar with it? If so, what do you think of it? I'm not familiar with it at all, so don't really have any thoughts on it. I apologize. Do you think you can solve, or do you have intention to solve great mysteries of world-like conspiracy theories? Conspiracy theories are fun, but and there's certainly some of them that hold water, like For instance, the Kennedy assassination and 9/11, you don't really have to look very far for something to be something to not seem right about those. But uh, you know, when we start getting into lizard people territory, it's not exactly. Uh, at that point, it to me is more like wrestling because it's entertaining, but it's you know. But as far as do I intend to solve great mysteries, I mean that is that's the plan. Has deduction help you notice things in class that most don't notice? I think it just helped me in general notice things that most people don't notice. Of course, there's always times where I miss things as well, and that's just you know those are the times where I have to remind myself to keep on keeping on and just get better and better because you're never going to be perfect. But all that means is that you can spend literally every second of your life working towards something, and the pursuit of a goal is where meaning is found in life rather than the attainment of a goal. Uh, I'm going. Oh, I'm going onto your live stream, and to be honest, I subscribed to you a while ago and never actually watched your videos. But what got you into this kind of stuff? Well, thank you for subscribing. Hope the videos end up being helpful to you if you do end up watching them at all. Um, what got me into this stuff is, it's multiple answers to that question. The main thing was just wanting to be able to understand people better, wanting to be able to pay attention to the world a little bit better. Um, so yeah, favorite incarnation of Sherlock Holmes. I've always been partial to Basil Rathbone, but I do quite have a soft spot for the Benedict Cumberbatch iteration. Stay away from my daughter, you pervert. I'm not quite sure who you're referring to. Uh, but let's all agree to stay away from everybody's daughters. You're supposed to wear the hat if you have the pipe. But the hat is all the way over there. What's the difference between inductive and abductive reasoning? Inductive and abductive reasoning um, are arguably used more in what we call deduction uh, than deductive reasoning. So, inductive reasoning essentially is when you take um, when you have a set of observations and you derive a conclusion based off of how those observations align with each other. Abductive reasoning is similar in that you don't have an established premise going in and you are using observations, but in abductive reasoning it's more so that you are checking a potential conclusion by seeing if it fits with every observable piece of information in the set of things that you have observed. Essentially, if it's a process of elimination, you can think of it like that. So if you have a conclusion, a potential conclusion, and it matches up with some of your data, but not all of it, you can rule it out because you obviously can't rule out the existence of the observations that you have. Maybe you're interpreting them wrong, but assuming you've interpreted them correctly, then you can't rule them out as not existing. So you have to rule out your hypothetical conclusion. Do you ever get burnt out? I find personally, after a few days of deducing people and things and studying deduction and looking into psychology, I lose interest for a while. Um, yeah, I mean, I got burnt out more so in the beginning. Uh, Nowadays, it's kind of steady going. But yeah, everyone gets burnt out occasionally. Uh, the way that I find to help with that is just keep it interesting, keep it new, keep it fresh. Don't fall into too much monotony, but at the same time, you do have to give yourself some structure. If you don't give yourself a way forward, some sort of schedule or some sort of goal day to day to give you something to move towards, if you just sort of wing it all the time, then that can also lead to you getting burnt out. So too much structure and too little structure can contribute to that. So you have to keep it fresh, but at the same time you have to, in keeping it fresh, continuously give yourself new and fresh goals to strive for. So there's an element of routine, but there's also not being bound to routine per se. I've gotten good at observing and describing things. So I've gotten better at writing. I'm at the top of my literary class. What other things do you think belong? Yeah, being able to describe the world like we do helps in. Um, well, first off, I'm glad you found your own particular niche in which you can direct this sort of pursuit. That's fantastic. A lot of people come to this and they're like, well, what sort of application does this have? And the beautiful thing about it is that it has almost infinite numbers of applications. You can apply your deductive abilities, let's say, to basically anything. Being able to observe and dissect problems more efficiently, and problem solve more efficiently, and understand people better. Uh, when you put it like that, there's hardly anything that sort of skill set wouldn't help you in. So it's good that you found a way to direct your own particular um, aspirations. So, uh, I think that would be the answer to your question. What other ways would being able to describe and observe the world benefit you? Anything, really. Anything in which you have to use words. Um, the observation and describing those observations aspect is essential. In mentalism, let's say, as a specific example, mentalists don't just read people; they actually practice this because you sort of so you see commonalities between people. You'll start to notice as you do this sort of thing for long enough that there are patterns that you observe. Patterns of being, patterns of behavior, that have common tells across people. Of course, the combination of these more broad things attribute to the individuality of the person, but people are more similar than they're different in many ways. So a mentalist will oftentimes practice how they word particular things, and they get good at wording their reads and coming up with new and fresh wordings of their reads every time. But a big part of making your reads seem fantastical is building them up with rhetoric. That you still have the information there. It's not like you're doing purely Barnum statements, where you might work or two of those in. You're doing genuine reads, but you build it up and you make it more dramatic with the use of language. So that would be a specific application. I'm a detective for the Minnesota National Guard. I teach the art of deduction to my rookies or day. Rookies or day ones keep up the good work. Oh, cheers. Empire's in the ring. Empire's reign. That's really cool. Motivation is the hardest thing for me to keep up, so I was wondering what you do to keep motivated. Yeah, I'll answer that one. Where do I live? The city? Mm, I told you what university. You can kind of guess from there the general area where I live, but I don't want stalkers. Which of Gardner's 8 intelligences do you believe are the most frequently exercised in the field of deduction? I'm not a big fan of Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. Um, I think it's hard to distinguish those different intelligences from just talents. You know, IQ is a particularly good metric for intelligence because it focuses what the word intelligence means. Intelligence isn't the end all be all of human performance. Let's say um, intelligence from an IQ standpoint simply has to do with how quickly you can learn and how and the complexity of things that you can conceptualize. It has to do with abstraction. It has to do with conceptualization. It has to do with cognitive speed. And there's a G factor. There's a common factor, a G factor in standardized intelligence tests. So you can it's quantifiable. And once you get into multiple intelligences, then you start to muddle what the word intelligence means. The word intelligence has a specific meaning, and that doesn't make it any better or worse than, let's say, inclinations to other fields of human expertise. Um, and le- the, there's overlap there. Again, people are more similar than they're different in many ways. So there's overlap between intelligence and, let's say, musical aptitude, um, spatial awareness, that sort of thing. But it's hard to distinguish those intelligences from just talents. Um, I do, however, like the idea of sort of increasing the complexity of the meaning of the word intelligence to a degree. I think Sternberg kind of hit a good medium there with the analytical intelligence, the creative intelligence, and the practical intelligence. And that's pretty much expressed in the IQ literature as well. I mean, you could say analytical and creative intelligence overlap in IQ. Um, and you could also say that I'm more so the analytical side, but that would be fluid intelligence, fluid IQ, whereas crystallized IQ would probably be more the practical intelligence. Or so I prefer Sternberg's. But um, as far as Garner goes, I think spatial awareness, spatial intelligence, as he put it, is a big part of deduction. You wouldn't think so initially, but it has to do with mindfulness, and that's something I think you can develop and hone. Which is another reason I don't think it's necessarily an intelligence because you can um, increase your spatial awareness and ability to understand your environment to a degree. Um, so yeah, how do you connect your shallow observations of someone to actual deduction of the person, as in understanding who they are or what they do because of something else maybe you understand? Well, everything a person does and doesn't do tells me something about them. Let's say there is a reception for a conference. Okay. Um, and at this conference, it's people, experts in different fields, coming uh, to chat about the advancements of the particular technology field or whatever. Let's say that they're all kind of in the same vein about it. And then at the end of the evening, there's a reception, and there's food, and there's music, and people are socializing. It's time to unwind. And then everyone starts to leave. And then there's one guy who hangs behind. What is that? What what does that tell me about him? It's an inaction, actually. The person is staying as opposed to leaving. So now that tells me something about him. It tells me, well, he doesn't have any plans to go and explore the city that he doesn't live in with any of his colleagues. So if he does intend to um, explore the city, it would be on his own, suggestive of more of an introverted personality. Let's say maybe he's singing along with the music, musically inclined, probably a creative type then, maybe. If he's in the technology field, there's certainly plenty of room for people with creative ideas, um, and introverted personalities as well. So you can see how like just one standout thing, like one thing that the guy didn't do, tells me a few things about him. If I, let's take me for instance. Why am I fiddling around with a pipe? What does that tell you ab- about me? What's the context? What's the setting? What's the purpose of the pipe? Do I smoke? Do I not? Maybe not. But I'm fiddling around with it. I'm fiddling with something. Suggests that, and I'm doing it while I'm talking, and it's not necessarily distracting me. If anything, it's helping me focus. You can sort of tell by how it flows with the cadence of my words. So you see how these superficial, or shallow, as you put it, observations, they just compound with the data that's around them. And if you just look at things and people with a keen eye, wanting to know what it says, you let the information speak for itself, it'll speak. So that's sort of an abstract way of putting it. Uh, but what do you want from me? I'm horribly sleep deprived. Hello, I'm a high functioning autistic. How may use seduction help my life? Well, I'm also high functioning autistic, so I can tell you that it's helped my life a great deal. Um, Particularly the nonverbal communication side of things. I particularly had emotional illiteracy with my end of this, with where I fell on the spectrum. So, uh, and which is quite common. So, being able to understand better nonverbal cues definitely improved my quality of life, and gave me more confidence, gave me more ability to integrate myself into social circumstances and thrive in social settings, and in many fields of many professional fields, being able to and be able to sort of understand people even on a superficial level is quite important. So it's definitely helped me in that way, and I would hope it could help you too. Hey, so I'm just beginning this process of observing. I wanted to just observe for around 2 months until I am fluent in these observations. What should I observe in people? Well, you're on the right track of just observing and starting out doing that. That's a big part and a big step that I sort of skipped because I didn't know what I was doing when I first started. And unfortunately, a lot of people skip, is that you want to jump right into making deductions, drawing conclusions, and positing inferences. But you can't you can't jump right to that without learning how to be keen to the world around you. Um, what should I look for in people? Uh, well, it depends on how far you've already gotten. How comfortable are you observing your surroundings? How much of second nature is it for you to observe the things around you? Do you notice, let's say, the colors of the clothes that people are wearing? Do you notice people's eye color and hair color? Can you look at a crowd, close your eyes, and then count how many people are there? Think about low resolution things like that. Once you start getting into more the problem solving and the deduction side of things, once you're more comfortable with those low resolution things, then you start. I would say look at the feet first, look at the hands, look at the knees. Um, Look at the general aesthetic of the clothing. Not necessarily those unimplied, unintentional things like scuffs on shoes and mud and uh, cuts and bruises and nicotine stains and stuff like that. That will come, but look first at those things, the general message of what the person is putting forth. And that goes back to our previous conversation on how do you make those superficial observations into deductions. And so everything that I wear tells you a little bit about me because I've chosen the things that I'm wearing and I've chosen them for a particular reason. Now, I might not be thinking much about that, but when you think of a habit or a preference, you're conscious when you in making that a thing, in creating a habit or having or establishing a preference. You're conscious in when you set it up, even though later on it becomes subconscious to follow. So it's natural for me to wear button up shirts, but why do I like the look of button up shirts? Why do I like gray and black and neutral and dark tones in particular? Why do I slick my hair back? Why do I talk with my hands? You look at the what sort of image am I trying to put forth? Because we all do that to an extent. And even if we don't, the fact that we don't tells a little bit about us. If we're not trying to purport some sort of identity through our appearance, that suggests a lack of clarity on one's identity or a lack of care in one's identity. And of course you go down that rabbit hole. Which one of those is it? You observe more and more things start to reveal themselves to you. So that's a sort of roundabout answer to your question. People have different opinions that Sherlock is more manic depressive or autistic. Where do you think he falls in? I fall more on the autistic side. Do I know my IQ? um I had an IQ test done when I was a kid, but I don't remember getting the results back. I know my brother is like in the 140 range. So is my mom, and I keep up pretty well with them. So I'd say high 130s to 140s. So also my sister is 130. So um, IQ tends to decrease across siblings. Um, as you get to the younger and younger siblings. So I'd probably fall somewhere between 130 and 140. But at the same time, going back to those multiple intelligences thing, I don't like to limit myself to particularly just my IQ. I don't think that's the end all be all of your cognitive abilities. They certainly define sort of your starting point and some of the things that you'll be able to accomplish, but it doesn't mean you should limit yourself in here. Let's say you don't want to put a prison around yourself based off of a number, uh, because maybe you can find that you can achieve more than you thought you could if you limited yourself to that number. I'm a field agent right now and I'm investigating a case of homicide. Oh, that sounds fun. And I'm not being tongue in cheek when I say that, which sorry, but yeah. Personally, I just want to be able to understand easily without instruction. You mean deduction? Well, I found that before I had some sort of instruction and guidance in this field, it was very much slow going because there's a lot of things to learn, and there's only a certain amount of you. So it's beneficial to learn from other people's mistakes and other people's lives and other people's work. That's why books are so magical, I would say, is because you can condense a person's life lessons, lessons that they learned the hard way, into a few pages for you to be able to learn what to do and what not to do. Of course, it's not as it's not the same as experiencing it for yourself, but maybe you don't have to experience it, or at least not in the same way. You can increase your rate of expansion exponentially. So I wouldn't shy away from instruction and guidance and learning from other people. I think that's just that's a fault of the over reliance on the ego. I've heard rumors of a third Sherlock Holmes movie with RDJ and Jude Law. What are your thoughts on it? I would love to see another movie with them, even though they're hilariously unrealistic. What would be the difference between a detective and a conspiracy theorist? A detective looks at a well, I mean, there are plenty of things. It's kind of hard to pick where to start. Um, okay, I would say a conspiracy theorist bases their claims off of speculation, whereas a detective bases their claims off of careful analysis. And this isn't necessarily the conspiracy theorist's fault, um, because in conspiracy theories, what do you have to go on? You have hearsay, you have blurry cell phone footage that all looks like it was taken in the early 2000s. We do have better cameras on our phones these days, but that's neither here nor there. Hearsay, bad footage, um, competing testimonies, and no way to do any legwork to verify any of it. Because it's all on the internet at this point. I mean, let's say there's a conspiracy, because conspiracies certainly happen. Let's say there's a conspiracy in your local government. You can certainly uncover that by going to the city hall and diving deep into the paperwork, following the money trail, talking to people, asking questions, digging deep. That would be the route a detective would go through. You're not speculating. You're not going into it saying there's definitely a conspiracy and thus starting yourself off with a bias and then gerrymandering the sparsely available evidence to fit your initial conclusion. You're going in and you're putting in the hours and the work and you're pouring through information, whether it's relevant or not, to see what is relevant so that you can piece together what's going on. So, functionally speaking, in that regard, there's two totally separate things, but of course, there's some overlap. I would say conspiracy theorists, personality wise, they don't tend to be unintelligent people or gullible people. It's actually a bit of a misconception. Studies have shown that conspiracy theorists' personalities are they're hyper pattern oriented and they're very skeptical. They're skeptical to the point of deceiving themselves because believing that everything that you're told isn't true is just as lazy as believing that everything that you're told is true. And you have to latch onto something. So if you're believing everything that comes from source A, let's say the government is not true, and then you believe everything that denies that source. So, but they are hyper pattern oriented, which makes them prone to seeing patterns where patterns don't exist. Because there's a random element to existence, huge random element to existence. Sometimes things happen and nobody planned for them to happen. This happens even when people are planning on stuff to happen. Sometimes things happen that are not by design, and that happens constantly. So it's actually hyper rational to think that everything happens because a group of people want it to happen. It makes sense in the sense that you want everything to have a rational, logical reason behind it. You want everything to be pushed by some intentional force. That would seem to make sense on some level, but it
Mm,
doesn't. It doesn't work um, be, all the time because there's a huge random element to existence. So I would say that's kind of the difference between a conspiracy theorist and a detective. But yeah, we could talk for hours about that. Are there any good subreddits for deduction? Not that I've found, but I'm not really good at Reddit, so. Fiddling with the pipe, probably more of an active mind, textile learner. See, now you're starting to play with the information. You're asking the right questions. How do I become more observant? I have plenty of videos detailing exercises that you can do. I've talked for hours about that, probably collectively on this channel, so there's no shortage of stuff to look for. Mindfulness meditation is also beneficial. Yes, that is a good exercise. I don't know if you said this already, but when looking for a school, were you trying to be aware if a school teaches deduction or something similar? Does it not matter to you? Well, there's not really a school or a class for deduction. There's hardly classes that you can take on nonverbal communication, and that's an accepted branch of psychology. So, no, that wasn't really a thought for me. Um, I'm going to the university that I'm going to right now mainly for practical reasons. They do have a good psychology program, which is great, and that's about the closest you can get to deduction in university. As opposed, other than I do intend to take a wide variety of classes because as a deductionist, you try to specialize, not specializing, by getting as broad of a knowledge base as you can. So I don't want to just hyper focus myself into psychology. Anyway, um, also, my mom is a professor at this university, so financially it works out. And I don't have to move away, which is also kind of nice, minus the weather. So, yeah. You have to listen on your phone and watch on the computer when which doesn't want to connect your what? I'm not quite sure what you mean. Do you like to use pens or pencils when slash if taking notes? Whatever I have available. It depends. I like both pens and pencils for different reasons. Neither are better than the other, they're just different. Have you ever done research on the case of high functioning autism? My life? Uh, as as far as like looking into studies, no. But I know what it's like to grow up as a high functioning autistic. So I feel like I'd get really depressed if I looked more into the studies. So have I ever tried to work as a detective or consult investigations? Depends on what you mean by work and consult. I've looked into local cases and cold cases and stuff like that as a mental exercise, but I've never actually contributed to an investigation. Oh, I see. That's sad, Chloe. At that point, just watch on your phone. That's what I would do. I would just plop myself in bed and watch on the phone. Any more questions, my friends? Am I live streaming at a reasonable time? It's 9:37, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how stylish do you think trench coats are? I have a really nice one. I'm in love with it. There we go. $11 would be the answer. You mentioned earlier that you are sleep deprived. Do you have insomnia, or is there any other reason for that? Insomnia, mainly, but also stress. It gets worse with stress. And yes, I have stated that before. I've been doing mental training with Lumosity and Brilliant. Have you tried either of these things? I have tried Lumosity. I think I still have an account. Yeah, they're fun games, but the literature is pretty clear that they don't improve IQ. They just improve your performance at those particular games. I think there's something to be said about the visual memory ones. Those, I think, have more carryover to other circumstances. But I also think there's a placebo effect that if you believe that these are helping you more, that they do have more carryover. So, have you been able to find websites that give you good info into cold cases? Most of the ones I've looked at did not give proper info to actually get a good idea of the cases. Yeah, I've run into the same exact problem. So, no would be the answer. I know. I apologize. I would say I'll for those of you who don't know, I do have a Discord server nowadays. I will start a channel on the Discord for cold cases and stuff, maybe. And when you have like 300, 400 people doing their thing and doing research, people are bound to find stuff and post it. So yeah. Do you know of any places that explain how to shorthand? I write so slow I can't even take good notes when observing. No, I don't. I don't know any good explanations of shorthand. I know I just write really fast, so it's not really a problem for me. But I think the key to shorthand is just making a system that works well for you. So if you can shorten and abbreviate words, like instead of writing with, write a W and a slash, that works. You can shorten your words into symbols and two-letter things rather than full words. That helps. Um, your mom being a professor explains a lot. See, you're playing with the data again. Good. Ever take a look at alternative reality games? They're highly immersive internet narratives. They tend to have creepy themes and elements. They tend to be immersive because they come in video form. I think I might have seen some Let's Plays of games like that, but I'm not much of a gamer, so. It's my personal mind pipe. There you go. I wonder if there's any VR escape rooms. Probably. I prefer escape rooms. Those are always fun. No, there's no smoke coming out of the pipe, so I think it's fair to say that I'm not smoking. Um, it just goes with the aesthetic of the channel. I don't know. Why did I decide to do this live? Because I'm tired and I'm not sleepy enough to go to bed. And I should be working on a paper, but I kind of don't want to. So there's a gap of time between now and tomorrow morning, but also before I can sleep. So I figured I would do something that helps me fall asleep and listen to my own boring voice. Do you get fast times in escape rooms? Actually, I actually haven't done many escape rooms. I've done like two, and those were with large groups of people. And I think the optimal number of people to do those sorts of things with are like two other people. Because when you have like eight, then it's just like everyone's talking and nothing is getting done. So I haven't really had a good chance to see if I'm good at escape rooms or not. It's also easier to do this over making an actual video. This is correct. Uh, they're actual video games. They have structured short form videos that leave you clues to solve the mystery and the story. Check out a YouTuber called Night Mind for some examples. Okay. I think I know what you're talking about now. I'll give it a link. I think you're talking about like choose your own adventure games. Uh, yeah, my paper is due in a few weeks, so I can put it off a little bit. I'll work on it tomorrow. Definitely. What other arts do you like? I like, well, to put it this way, my mother's a painter, and she's a professor of art and art history and 2D design and all that, and also an academic advisor for the whole of the art department at this university. So let's just say I was raised around the arts. So I am a fan of painting. Although I found out because I went to the Louvre not too long ago, I had a chance to go to Paris and I went to the Louvre. I found out that I like sculpture more than painting, which is, I did not expect that, but I like sculpture more than painting. Um, I'm a, I love music. Uh, my favorite genre, I would say, is jazz. Um, I just love I just love artistic expression in general because it's human expression and it allows you to understand things on a level in which it would be difficult to articulate with words. But even when you get into the linguistic arts, literature, philosophy, uh, stuff like that, I have a love for it all. I love the humanities. I'm not the biggest fan of how they're particularly taught in many universities, but I love the idea of the humanities and the arts. What time do you actually usually sleep and wake up? Well, I have to wake up at 6:30 so that I can have a long shower in the morning to wake up so that I can then drive to school and get to school at around 7:40 so that I can get to class with about 15 minutes to spare. So, what I try to go to bed at around 10:30, 11ish every night. But depending on how tired I am, it takes me a while to sleep. And I ended up taking a nap today, which was a mistake. So, yes, Ghostly Archer, please get some rest if you need it. Daniel says, "Hi, are you interested in foreign languages? Wonder how deduction is universal, perhaps your opinion." Well, I love languages. I'm trying to learn Italian since my family is Italian. My mom emigrated from Italy to America. So I'm trying to learn Italian so I can communicate more with some of my relatives and also just, you know, it's a beautiful language. But I love languages. And even though I'm not bilingual as of yet, um, I do have a bit of an ear for noticing the differences between languages. Like I'm pretty good at spotting out like the differences between Chinese and Japanese. For instance, to me, like I can't even. It, it's very rare when I confuse the two. Um, and also in the romantic languages, I like looking for the subtle differences between languages of the same language families. Um, but when I went to Paris, um, there was a lot of overlap for deduction. And that makes sense because America and France are both Western countries and they're both influenced by the much of the same history uh, up until, let's say, um, I mean, up until the Magna Carta, the Roman law code that Justinian put in place 1,000 years ago was the universal for all of Europe, which is in part what the Magna Carta was based off of, which is what American law is based. So it's not been too long since Europe had its more major divergences, I would say, but they're both Western countries. They both have European origin. They and so while there are stark differences between the culture in the more obvious ways, there's so much overlap that a lot of my knowledge of deduction that I've honed here in America worked in France as well. But there were nuances in the body language that was different, and that actually gave me this idea that I wanted to pursue more. Um, that perhaps one of the reasons why you can spot out a person from a different country, even if they're of the same ethnicity, let's take the European countries again, for example. They're all Caucasian for the most part, but you can spot an Italian in a crowd of Americans. You can spot an American in a crowd of French. You can spot a British man in a crowd of Germans. Why? I think part of it has to do with subtle genetic differences and in the bone structures. I'd say that's very evident with the British in particular. But I think a bigger part of that is the nuances in the nonverbals, because a lot of nonverbal communication is culturally based. The basics of nonverbal communication is biologically based, but how that is extrapolated further, just like other languages. Spoken language is innate on a biological level, but there's so many different languages governed by different cultures. So I would say nonverbal communication has the potential to have the same sort of effect. So I want to look more into that. But yeah, um, that's a roundabout answer to that question. What is my personal definition of mental illness? I'm gonna skip that one because mental illness is something that's very very difficult to define, and I don't think that right now I am adequately prepared to answer that question right now. So yeah, what's your bestest hobby? Deduction. Can you deduce political leanings to any degree? Yeah, yeah, that's one of the easiest things to do. Actually, it's it's actually pretty interesting once you understand the psychology of it. So you can map out to a pretty high degree that personality temperament directly coincides with political leaning. People who are low in openness and higher in conscientiousness, but mainly low in openness, tend to be conservative, whereas people who are high in openness tend to be more liberal. And the conscientiousness aspect would send. If a person is high in openness but also high in conscientiousness, that would be more of a centrist person. Um, but yeah, so that's those are the big five metric. That's the big five personality model metrics. You really don't have to do much studying into that before you start noticing that in your deductions. Okay, this is a creative type of person who's able to balance multiple ideas at one time. So there's a correlation with intelligence. That person is high in openness. You'll see a divergence there. Those are the types of people who like new ideas, who like to dissolve boundaries between things. That's going to be more of a liberal person most of the time. Someone who likes things to be in their specific boxes, their specific categories, who isn't necessarily unintelligent, um, but maybe a little bit more conscientious, a little bit more boxed in with their thinking, a little bit more practical, less conceptual, that person's going to be leaning more on the conservative side of the spectrum. So it's actually pretty easy to deduce political leaning. And I've been able to do so with a pretty high degree of accuracy. It's one of the easier things that I've been able to do. How is deduction different in Paris? Do cultural behavioral norms mess up a few deductions? I think I already did answer that question. Event Horizon. Yo, man, what up? What up? Uh, have a good night. Excalibur. Gonna go for now, but I really like your live stream Q&A. Have a good night. Just wondering, since you said you were doing psychology, put on what was... Oh, okay, the mental illness. Yeah, I'm trying to stay away from the clinical side of psychology. That's not my interest in the least. Um, Kana Kamoy, um, your messages keep on getting retracted, so that's not me deleting them. The YouTube is just for some reason feels like your messages are spam or that you're using uh, language it doesn't approve of. I don't know. I don't like having the automatic moderation on there, but it does help with legit spam. So I don't know. Maybe you could reword your question so that your messages don't get retracted. Um, Perché? Uh, sì. uh, Explosion mental. Gonna. I kind of caught what you said. Um, like that's the thing. I'm pretty good at like picking out the general idea of romantic languages, particularly Italian. But I think what you were asking was um, why did I decide to study deduction? Um, and I can't quite get. I don't quite understand the last half. Do you know of any other historical figures that were any historical figure that relates to Sherlock Holmes? Well, of course, Doyle and uh, Dr. Joseph Bell. Other historical figures, more recently, I would say John Douglas. He's the guy who, in part, developed the FBI's profiling methodologies. He wrote the book Mindhunter. I would say every forensic scientist, every detective since the Victorian age that applies a scientific method to criminal investigation is an embodiment of Holmes in a way. So yeah. Psychological deductions are the best deductions because of how broad they are and how easily they can be narrowed down. Yeah, I would say they're a good place to start with a read. Personality. Because when you understand a person's personality, you can then understand how they would react to different things. So it becomes easier to interpret the other observations that you make, more static tells. Oh, Connor, you were retracting your own messages. I see. Sir, you're brilliant, but if you make your video more interesting, you'll rock. By the way, I'm your great fan. Well, thank you for that backhanded, encouraging yet depressing compliment. I will endeavor to make my video more interesting. He asked, "Why did you decide to study exercise Italian, and what has changed dramatically?" Um, well, I kind of answered why I decided to study Italian because I am Italian. Well, I'm Italian American who doesn't speak Italian, so I would like to rectify that. Uh, and nothing has changed dramatically, in particularly, other than I'm asking my mother to speak to me more in Italian than English. So yeah. Your phone keeps buzzing every couple of minutes. Why is that? Because I'm a very popular person. Have you seen the new Holmes and Watson movie trailer? No. Is that the one with Will Ferrell? Because I'm not intending to watch that. His phone is blowing up with DMs from his girls. Haha, JK. Well, you're not wrong. Just kidding, my girlfriend's asleep right now, probably. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he said deduction, not Italian. Where's my cat? He's outside somewhere. Ugh. Well, if you guys are going to stop asking me questions, I might as well see what people want from me. What made you anchor your interest in deduction? Because it is a very boring but useful topic. It's not boring at all. It's probably the most fun thing I do day to day. So I think the premise of your question is flawed. I'm interested in deduction precisely because it is interesting. Do I have a favorite color? It would be brown. I thought deductive reasoning was what you told me abductive reasoning was. This may seem like a stupid question, but can you clarify what deductive reasoning in its purest form is? So, deductive reasoning is where you start with a general premise and you apply it to an observation. And if the premise is true and you apply it to the observation correctly, then the conclusion that you derive must be true. An example is all men are mortal, Jordan is a man, Jordan is mortal. So, deductive reasoning is more so used in argumentation, but at the same time, we use it in deduction as well. Deduction. So, that would be deductive reasoning in its purest form. Like a Sherlockian example would be all right, so with glasses, corrective lenses. You know how when a person is wearing glasses and they step off to the side like this, you can see how the image of their face sort of distorts. Now, if that image is pushed inward, so you see the. I wish I had. I wish I had glasses so I could show you guys. But here, maybe we can. We'll use a magnifying glass. So you see how the image is distorting outwards, like that. So let's imagine this is a pair of glasses. All right, so when the image distorts outwards like that, it means the glasses are to correct farsightedness. So the person can see things well far away, but things up close need to be magnified. Now, if the image is distorted inwards, sort of like that, not exactly, you know what I'm talking about. When the image is distorted inwards, it means the glasses are correcting nearsightedness. So the person can see things up close just fine, but they can't see things far away very easily. Bifocals correct for both. So basically those eyes are fucked both ways. So if you understand that, if you see a person wearing glasses that distort the image outwards, then they are farsighted. Unless they're like, these glasses, they hurt my eyes, then they may not need those glasses. But at the very least, those lenses are designed to correct for farsightedness and opposite for nearsightedness. So that would be an application of deductive reasoning because the premise is true regardless. It will always be that way. So, deductive reasoning is used more for interpretation of observations, understanding what observations mean, putting those observations together. Think of the use of deductive reasoning in deduction as like looking up a word in the dictionary. Well, looking up a word in the dictionary doesn't tell you what the sentence means. You have to read the sentence, read all the words in context to understand what the meaning trying to be conveyed is. That is where you use abductive and inductive reasoning in deduction. So understanding the observations, that would be more deductive reasoning, but understanding how those observations fall together, that's more inductive reasoning. And understanding how your potential conclusions relate to your observations is abductive reasoning. So that's a very rudimentary understanding of deductive, inductive, and abductive reasoning. I will endeavor to put a video or something together explaining those things more in depth. What makes a person intelligent? I'd like to know your opinion. Well, I did talk at length about this earlier in this live stream about IQ versus Garner's eight intelligences theory. I think intelligence needs to be a focused word that has to do with how a person balances multiple ideas, how deeply they can conceptualize things, the limit of their abstraction. If you were to think physiologically, it would be the density of the gray matter in their prefrontal cortex and that decision-making area of the brain. So the denser the gray matter, the faster the synapse responses, the faster messages travel within the brain's tissue. That would be the physiological understanding of what makes a person intelligent. It has to do with your brain. But that's fluid intelligence. That's the intelligence that is completely generalized. You can generalize completely, so you can apply your problem-solving abilities in that regard to any problem. Crystallized intelligence is your ability to solve problems based off of what you have learned. When did you get a girlfriend? Last time I saw you on a live stream, you said you were single. I obviously got a girlfriend sometime in between this live stream and the last live stream. She's a very lovely lady. She's amazing. What proclivities do you have apart from deduction? Well, I did talk a little bit before about my love of the arts. I do love the arts and the humanities. I do love science as well. Like, don't get me wrong. I love chemistry particularly. I haven't had much time to dive deeper into that, but at the same time, they all blend into deduction in a way. I like to draw. That helps me unwind. And I think I'm pretty good at it. Uh, I like. I'm proclivities. I'm good at. I'm good at memorizing movie quotes. Like, I could literally quote you the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy, extended edition. We could be here for 9 hours, and I would not stop talking. And I would be doing the different voices too. See, the way I remember movie quotes is I don't remember necessarily what was said. I remember how it was said. I remember the vocal fluctuations, and that helps me. Yeah. So I guess that's one of my odd proclivities. Also, um, reading. I don't know. Is your circadian rhythm good currently? Well, the last live stream was the benefit of having no circadian rhythm is that I don't get jet lag. I don't really have a circadian rhythm. I don't think. I mean, I probably do, technically speaking, functionally speaking, not so much. I don't really notice it's there. Socrates is mortal. There you go. That's the all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Socrates is mortal. Yes, that's the. I was trying to make it about me. What are some everyday things you can do to practice your deductions? Practice making deductions. That's They're like exercises you can do. But if you're thinking about just stuff you can do day to day, actually trying to read people and put things together, that is how you practice day to day without having to do specific exercises. What is your deduction level, sir, out of 10? It is over 9,000. I like that response. Um, I don't like to scale things like that from 1 to 10. I think I think it reduces the complexity of it because I'm better in certain aspects of it than others. Like, for instance, eh, and like, what is 10 and what is 0? I know it seems like I'm dodging the question because I am, but in all honesty, I have a lot to learn, but I'll always have a lot to learn. I I'd say that you guys do give me more credit than I'm due sometimes. Um, but I'd say I'm pretty decent. I'd say I've put in the hours and have earned some little tiny bit of bragging right. No, not bragging right. Something. I've earned I don't know. New phone who dis? It's Jordan. A Cardall. Nondescript guy. I wake up every day with stoicism. I'm pathetic, to be honest. I really have nothing to live for. I should have been one of the sperm cells that died and gave someone else a chance. Sigh. Life, huh? Well, I don't know if you're being tongue in cheek about this, but let's take this and look at it from the opposite perspective. The probability of your own existence is so infinitesimal that if I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't bet on any of your existences because the odds of any of us existing is so tiny that it's not even it's hardly imaginable that we're all here because all of your ancestors had to find the specific mates that they found. They had to copulate at the exact time that they did so that the specific sperm that fertilized the specific egg did so, and that fertilization resulted in the combination of the genes that made you, well, let's say your distant ancestor, who then had to do the same thing, find an exact partner, do the thing at the specific times, the specific sperm and the specific egg and the specific combination, and then you compound that, and you compound that, and you compound that over thousands and thousands of generations, and you get you, the thing that shouldn't probability wise exist, and it's here, and that's something to be marveled at. So you might think that that part of you that is disparaging existence might think that it would have been better if it didn't happen that way. But the thing of the matter is that it did happen that way, and you're here. And that's an incredible thing. So at a certain point, you have to, instead of questioning yourself, you have to question the perspective that you're viewing yourself from. And I think that might be able to help you have a bit of a better outlook and hopefully help you to strive towards improving yourself because nobody should be satisfied with themselves. I think it's a lie that we get told that you should be happy about yourself. Not necessarily, but you shouldn't disparage your own existence. You should be happy in the fact that there's potential in your existence and that you have the potential to achieve things by striving towards things. That's where you're going to find fulfillment. That's where you're going to find true expression of yourself. And that's fulfilling. So, question the perspective that you view your own existence from because it doesn't have to be so disparaging. Oh, I got behind on my comments. Okay, will you post this on the channel? I'll probably leave it up for a while. Why do you want to study deduction? You said because it's interesting. Yet, so are a lot of things. Is there anything specific about deduction? Well, I mean, I've kind of explained this. I don't know, 5 times in this particular live stream. But deduction is, in a way, the ultimately transferable skill set. Uh, As opposed to framing the question of what can you apply deduction to, I don't see really anything, any professional field, where a better memory, better awareness, better problem solving abilities, and better understanding of people wouldn't benefit you a lot. Sure, you don't have to have those things, just like you don't have to know how to read, but those things do nothing but help you. So, yeah, it's interesting, and that's what motivates me. But there's also this extreme utility to it of understanding things better. I'm never satisfied with my understanding. So I want to be better than what I am. That keeps me going. So if I'm going to be a master of something, might as well be a master of what makes you a master at everything, if that makes sense. What are some good exercises to increase your memory capacity? Well, you have to actually put the time and effort into working on memory systems. So you have to work on your mind palace, you have to work on your peg system, you have to work on this, that, and the other. Um, like for with the mind palace, for instance, you have to find a location and then you have to carve out a journey through it. It's not like you get to free roam through your mind palace all willy nilly like in Sherlock. That's not how it works. You have to make a journey. So you go through the environment the same way every time, stopping at the same objects or pegs. This is where you're going to visually encode things. So maybe the first thing that in my mind palace is it's not, but like let's say for instance I was making this my mind palace, just this desk. I would maybe look at the pop filter first, and then lamp, and then the old learner's permit, and then the drawing here, and then a hat, and then the books, and then the screen, and then the painting, and then the computer. And then I would go through it again. Pop filter, da, 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 da. And I'd go through it again until it's seared into my brain and I can close my eyes and I can go through it and see it in my head. Then I would visually encode information there. So so in my mind palace, um, I have a section that where I have all the a lot of the big theorists in psychology. I had to memorize those for an exam. Uh, so Carl Rogers, uh, he is so the visual encoding is the peg is this elevator door. That is the part of my mind palace where I'm encoding this information. Now here's where my imagination comes in. Okay, what Carl Rogers? What do I think of when I think Rogers? When I think of Roger Rabbit, that's me. You might think of something else. You might think of a different Rogers or Roger, something. As long as it reminds you of what you're trying to remember, it's fine. So I think of Roger Rabbit, and Carl Rogers was a humanist, and his theory was you have to have unconditional respect for the client. That is the way to have open communication, and you need open communication for therapy to be curative. So I imagine Roger Rabbit in front of this elevator door, and there's a random client, and I know he's a client because in front of the elevator door, I'm also imagining a your stereotypical therapy couch, and Roger Rabbit is being unconditionally respectful to this client by like, hey, have a seat, sit on this couch, you good, you need a cup of tea. Like Roger Rabbit is clearly expressing that. And that's how who Carl Rogers is and what he did. And then literally the next theorist that I have in my mind palace, literally the next peg is Maslow. Um, And Maslow was a tricky one. I had to think of what I could envision for that name. Um, so I broke it down into two words: mass and low. And so you know those diagrams of the gravitational of gravity and how mass sort of sits in this fabric of time, space time, and you know how like a planet makes a little tiny depression, a star makes a big depression, and then a black hole is like whoosh, and there's this. Whoosh, you can look it up and Google it, but that's what I think. So the black hole is mass in a singularity, so mass, and it's very very low. So mass low, and so I think of Maslow, and that's in front of a broom closet door that is right next to the elevator door. And Maslow came up with the hierarchy of needs, and I just think of that Maslow image inside a triangle. So that was how I encode that. So with the Mind Palace, the utilization of it trains your memory, trains you in that memory system. I also memorize decks of cards with the same system. I have 52 pegs in my Mind Palace that have a high turnover rate. I will memorize a deck of cards in the order which they appear in those 52 pegs, and then I'll wipe it clean by memorizing it again in a different order with the same pegs. So Mind Palace isn't necessarily permanent storage unless you continuously review it. So anyway, I spent entirely too much time on that question. Any instruments? I do not play any instruments, unfortunately. Any tips for future Sherlock Holmes? Don't kill your Moriarty too quickly. Makes for a boring fourth season. Is deduction ethical on a privacy basis? Well, see, you're asking the right questions. A big part of my thoughts on deduction revolve around the ethics of it. That's why I'm not necessarily a fan of the idea of a profiling computer, a computer that can profile, an algorithm that can read people, because then you just create a tool that anybody can use. There's a certain bar to entry for deduction. You actually have to put in a lot of effort to understand how to do it. And to be able to do it with any degree of efficacy, you have to put hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours into it. And so when you earn power, you end up having a little bit more of respect for power than when you're just handed it. That's why people who build fortunes tend to be a little bit more responsible with those fortunes than people who inherit fortunes, um, because there's respect for what you have earned as opposed to what you've been given and what you can use freely in whatever way you see fit without any thought of the consequences. With having to earn something, you're constantly thinking of the consequences because the consequences are very real because you've had to deal with them in attaining the abilities that you have. But at the same time, I still think about the ethics of it. You know, when people ask me, like, when people ask me what I do, and I tell them, I do deduction and I read people and stuff like that, they're like, oh, cool. Well, what can you figure out about me? Okay. In those circumstances, I might have 20 things lined up, and I might say 5 or 10 of them. Because the other 15 to 10 may not be socially acceptable to say. It's not exactly nice when you so if we're just talking about speed deductions, flash deductions, passing deductions as we call them, or as I call them, um, like those are dominant hand, approximate age, and activity level. It's not exactly polite to say that you have a low activity level based off of your lack of muscular development and adipose tissue, which also might lend itself to genetic predisposition to a slow metabolism and or poor American diet. It's not necessarily polite to say that. so I won't say it. So that gets even worse when you start to notice things that people really don't want other people to know because it could damage the integrity of people's perception of them rather than just mere embarrassment. And those situations are fun. And by fun, I mean not at all. Unless you're a little bit crazy, which I think is also part of entry for this, but I digress. Um, and so I do think about the ethics, and I think that it's one thing to understand things. It's one thing to be able to see people's secrets. It's another thing to deal with them, to publish them without the person's consent. So there are innocuous deductions that you can make about people that people don't really care that you say. Um, and those are fun to show off with, but when you understand certain things about people that people really would obviously be something that the person wants to be kept secret, you need your consent. You need their consent before you reveal that. So that's where the ethics really lie. That's the crux of the matter, I would say. A world without secrets would be a world. I think that would be, if we attained a world without secrets, I think that would end everything that we've built as a society, because then no one can trust anyone. There's a certain honor system in our social contract that you're allowed to keep everything secret as long as I'm allowed to keep everything secret. And yes, I might stab you in the back, but you might also stab me in the back, so we'll probably not stab each other in the back. But when everyone's deepest, darkest, horrible thoughts are and actions are apparent, everyone starts to find out that everyone is a shitty person. And that's not very conducive for the social contract. I enjoy it. I relish in that. And it's not as simple as everyone being a horrible person, because there's it's not so clear cut. Being a deductionist shows you how bad people can be, but it also shows you how good they can be too. People are messy is the thing. People don't like to. It ruins people's conceptual schemas. And when everyone is super complex, everything becomes super complex, and when everything is too complex, then nothing works. If that makes sense. Do you think psychopaths are intelligent? They tend to score higher on IQ tests than the general population. Essentially, they have a lower gray matter density in the paralimbic system of their brain, so the emotional processing and experience center of the brain isn't very strong from a gray matter density standpoint. I think it's similar to autism in the sense that gray matter density of certain regions of the brain are sacrificed for gray matter density in other regions. So I think maybe the lack of gray matter density in the paralimbic system is then, in a Darwinian fashion, it occupies the space of the prefrontal cortex, which might uh, account for the statistically higher IQ scores in the psychopathic population than the normal population. Um, But if you're talking about intelligence in the sense of learning from your mistakes, psychopaths are definitely unintelligent. They're good at being able to conceptually solve problems, but they can't really conceptualize the fact that anything could be their fault, in the sense of they cannot learn from negative experiences, they cannot learn from their own failures, because they cannot conceptualize that anything is of a fault of their own. So in that sense, they're very unintelligent. But don't underestimate the intelligence of a psychopath, because they are very, very, very good at manipulating people, because they're very good at mimicking people. and mimicking emotions and being able to manipulate emotions. They're very good at social engineering because they treat people like objects rather than people. And when you treat people like objects rather than people, you can maximize the causal nature of human motivation. Are you better at reading people or reading your environment and what has happened to it? I'd say I've spent more time reading people, but there's a lot of carryover between the two. Do you ever try to deduce where your cat has been? I kind of know where he hangs around. He has a certain radius he doesn't go far from. Uh, but no, I don't try to deduce where my cat has been. He's his own person. If you could pick anyone to be your arch enemy, who would it be? Well, if I could have pick who gets to be my arch enemy, I'm either going to go really lazy and pick someone who is really easy to defeat, or I'm going to go all out and get the worst, horriblest nemesis that could ever nemesai with me, and I would get killed. So, don't ask me that question, because I'll have too much fun with it. I just clicked onto talking how kids are created. Yeah, it was a weird moment for the channel, but I like to relish in the improbability of everyone's existence. The universe is infinite? Maybe. Energy can only be transferred but never destroyed, suggests that at some point in the future, it is 100% that these particles will rearrange themselves. Yeah, yeah, and everything will eventually get to a heat death of the universe where nothing new ever happens ever because an equilibrium of all the matter and energy in the universe has been achieved. Where are you from? I'm an Italian American. How are you dealing with uni work? Are you a second year student or a first? I took a gap year, so I am a first year student. How am I dealing with it? I am dealing with it as well as anyone can. I made this lady mad at the gas station using deduction. She was asking me to pay for her gas, which I would have done if she needed it, but her shoes were extremely clean, her car was nice and tidy, and she had an iPhone X. So, well, when people's lies are found out, they tend to get aggressive because what else do you do? Do you just sit there and admit, hey, I'm a liar, or say, hey, I'm an idiot? Because those are your only two options. Or you can get aggressive and try and diffuse the situation by crafting a new situation. So, not really weird. The psychology of it is pretty simple. Yo, do people really do that in America? Ask for gas from someone else like that? It happens. I get asked for money and gas and cigarettes a lot, even though I don't smoke. What could be the things that people want to hold secret regarding observation? What could be the things that people want to hold secret regarding observation? So, like, you can reveal personal things about people in regards to their, let's say, relationships with other people in the setting, which could be embarrassing to them or could compromise their integrity, um, stuff like that. It's hard to give examples without. But as far as the showing off thing, you can say, you know, you've been, you know, you can tell them where they've been, that day, the sort of, yeah, you can tell them what sort of job they work. You can sort of give them a rundown of their personality. Those are show off types of deductions that they essentially, if you think the person would tell you that in conversation if you asked about it, it's okay to say as a deduction. Uh, when is your birthday? Uh, that's a bit of a personal question. It's somewhere between January and December of the year 1999. That's all you get. I apologize if you already find it, but you've brought up something known as gray matter a lot, and I wanted to know what that means. So basically, you have certain types of neural tissue, and gray matter would be the neural tissue where your dendrites are, and your dendrites are those things that communicate with each other to produce all the thoughts in your head. So gray matter is essentially the thinking or message receiving and sending part of your brain, whereas the white matter is more of the protective tissue and connective tissue, which is arguably more important and or just as important as the gray matter from a structural and functional standpoint. So gray matter, when talking about gray matter density, the higher the gray matter density, the closer the dendrite, the more dendrites there are, meaning the closer that they are because it's denser. So when the dendrites are closer, the synaptic cleft. So a synapse is a dendrite. A dendrite sort of looks like this. So you have the nucleus, and you have this part here, and you have these little tentacle-looking things. I know the terms, I just cannot remember them right now because I am dead. So basically, these at the end of them, they have what are called terminal buttons, and that is where neurochemical transmitters are released. And there will be another dendrite up here with tentacle looking things that will receive those neurotransmitters. And then, if this, let's say this dendrite receives a neurotransmitter through its terminal buttons, it is then converted by the DNA in the nucleus into an electrochemical. I'm sorry. An electrical signal, I forget the term, bioelectrical signal, which goes down this and into the end, which is where it is then converted again to a neurochemical. So this could be serotonin, it could be dopamine, it could be acetylcholine, and so there are multiple dendrites around that dendrite that can pick, depending on the direction of the thought, that there's, put it this way, the combinations of how dendrites can interact with one another, the number of combinations in your brain of those interacting dendrites is greater than, by a large margin, the number of particles in the universe. That's pretty impressive. So, in a way, the human brain is one of, if not the most complex system in the universe, which is pretty impressive. But anyway, so when we're talking about gray matter density, think of those dendrites as closer, meaning there are more of them, meaning there are more combinations. And not only that, but the synaptic cleft, which is the space in between those little tentacle things on the ends of the dendrites, The synaptic cleft is smaller, meaning that those neurochemicals can transmit to each other faster. So gray matter density has to do with the um, processing speed on a neurological level of information. That is my very rudimentary understanding of the brain. It could definitely be better. I need to take a neuroscience class. But that is what I understand from the reading that I've done in the psychology class that I've taken. Anyway, moving on. What do you think about Mayweather versus the Asian guy? I didn't see that fight, but uh, I didn't see that fight. Okay. Chloe, speaking of getting asked for money, one time I got back from New Orleans and I was flat broke. So what I did was I sold all my video games, which gave me like $50 total. And I was walking out of GameStop, and this homeless dude makes a beeline for me. And he doesn't even there's no like pleasantries. He's like, "Hey man, can I have some change?" Because I was putting the money into my wallet as I was walking out, and I had mostly bills, but a couple of quarters. So I was like, "Okay, here's 50 cents." And he was like, and he looked in my wallet and saw all the cash, which wasn't all that much, but he was like, "Can I have some more?" And I was like, "Yo, I'm selling video games to pay my phone bill. I don't really have. I can't. I need this. I can't really. I can't part with it. I am sorry." What do you think about the personality test, Myers Briggs? As you talked about it before, every time I take the exam, it gives a different result. Yeah, so that test isn't very reliable, and I don't. When I made that video, I wasn't as knowledgeable about psychology and personality tests as I am now. I was just getting into it, and the Myers Briggs is well known. Unfortunately, it is one of the ones that people know about the most, even though it is one of the least accurate. So, or reliable, I should say. The Myers Briggs test has some problems. I think it's okay if you want to use it for general things or you want to do it for fun. But as a psychometric, there's a reason we don't use it. There's a reason we use the Big Five model because the Big Five model is consistent, it's reliable, it's efficacious, it's 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 the gold standard. What's your astrology sign? I'm a Sagittarius. Also, thoughts on astrology. I think astrology is fucking bullshit, but I am a Virgo. Favorite Star Wars character? Chewbacca, I would say. Dak Fawcett. All this talk about gray matter brings other thoughts to mind. Aliens. Your thoughts, Jordan? Real or as fake as the birds? I think you gerrymandered that question. I don't really know if there are aliens out there. I'm not really invested in that idea that there are or there aren't. If there are, we may or may not find them. If they're outside of our galactic local group, we'll never find them because of how the universe is expanding and there are gravitational centers where basically we are stuck within a galactic local group, which is an infinitesimally small part of the universe, which is a cluster of galaxies that are orbiting around a gravitational focal point. And so there are like these little bubbles of the universe. And the universe is expanding, of course, and those bubbles are getting further and further apart from each other because the galaxies aren't necessarily evenly distributed. They orbit around gravitational hotspots, hyper hotspots, I guess you would say. These giant galaxies are all grouped together by their own gravity and to these little bubbles. And so, as the universe expands further and further out, even if we were able to escape our galactic local group, we wouldn't, because of the rate at which the universe is expanding, we could never get to another galactic local group by conventional means. Now, if we found out some method of instant teleportation, which seems unlikely, even with the theory of relativity and all that fun stuff with wormholes, those are hyper unstable. So even if we, so assuming we can get that to work, maybe we can find the aliens in other local groups. But assuming we cannot, we would be stuck with the possibility of life only within our galactic local group. And life, I think, is a very improbable thing. I'm not necessarily ruling it out, but I don't think it's very likely. And I mean that in the sense of, I'm not sure how I mean that. uh, would it be cool if there were some aliens out there? Absolutely. Do you have 5 fingers at Fiji water bottle? I don't know. This is a conversation. I'm entering into this conversation late, but I don't have 5 fingers. I have 10. Why did you take a gap year and what did you do in that time? Well, I took a gap year for the same reason of what I was doing in that gap year. I was reading a lot of books and listening to a lot of lectures in psychology, and I was studying. And I wanted to take a gap year because I didn't want to jump straight into university because I wanted to prepare myself a little bit more and have some time to really um, collect my thoughts and really figure out what I wanted to major in, and then prepare myself for that study. And so that's what I did. And I think it worked. I think it's working out pretty well for me. Some people take a gap year later because they realize that they need a breather because they never took a breather between college and high school. That's what my girlfriend is doing right now. She's taking a gap semester, but yeah. So I mean, that's why I did it. I think it worked out. What do you think of Robert Greene's books, 48 Laws of Power, Art of Seduction, etc.? I know my ex girlfriend read 48 Laws of Power at some point, and that kind of turned me off to it. I'm not really big into the social engineering aspect of this sort of skill set or seduction per se. I mean, yeah, um, I try to be more genuine than I understand the principles of power, and I understand how people get to power and what conveys power. And I think if you just confine yourself, or what it conveys attraction, let's say, if we're talking about seduction, and I think if you try to have a checklist, and be like, oh, well, I did that, and I did that, and I did that, you're not embodying those things. You're just pretending to be those things. It's like playing dress up. So I would rather form myself into a person that is powerful and commanding of respect and attractive psychologically, and embodying those takes living more than reading, if that makes sense. So I try to embody ideas rather than have a checklist on what to do in if you want X result. That's why I don't like tips and tricks. That's why I don't do tips and tricks videos, because they're fucking bullshit. If you have a space with an infinite amount of time, and you also have some moving inside that space, bouncing around, it is guaranteed that at some point the thing will end up in the same place. At some point, about as layman as I can get, people actually think Australia is fake. What? That Quillen, you're getting off on more tangents than me. Slow your roll, buddy. Like, regroup. Batman versus Daredevil. Batman, obviously. Batman's gonna win that one. Don't get me wrong. Daredevil's pretty badass. But Batman is Batman. I have bamboozled you. Now I can narrow down your birthday month. Not like it matters, as I totally guessed that you were a Virgo with your whole deduction thing. Also, I think astrology is just fun. Yeah, I knew that's where you were going with it. I literally had the thought crossing my mind of if I say that I'm a Virgo, they'll figure out more of where my birthday lies. But I was willing to do that because I would rather you guys solve problems than have me spoon feed you the answers. Astrology can be fun, but it doesn't change the fact that it's bullshit. What can you deduce about types of accessories people wear? Um, so accessories are interesting because they're wealth indicators or social standing indicators. They fall sort of in that category, and you can divide it further in from aesthetics accessories to functional paraphernalia. Let's say, and those can have some overlap too. So let's take smoking for example. You can have cigarettes are, let's say, functional paraphernalia. You have a standard lighter and a pack of cigarettes. Okay, there's there's a focus on the function there. You can learn a few things about the person based off of that. Now, let's say a person has a Zippo lighter and a metal cigarette case. What does that tell you about them? Well, now the functional paraphernalia is bleeding over to social status and wealth symbols, so there's an aesthetic quality to it. All right, let's take a pipe. All right, there's a certain pipe smoking can be a hobby and sort of an art more than just a habit. Pipe smoking, you don't inhale. If you inhale, you're doing it wrong and it's going to burn your lungs. With a pipe, you suck the air into your mouth, but you don't. This is, I know you guys are going to, because you're all fucking 9 year olds, but the air goes into your mouth, but you don't inhale it. And so it's like you get an air bubble like that. And obviously, that's not how you smoke. It's not what it looks like when you smoke a pipe. But anyway, you don't inhale it. So, and there's a lower nicotine content in the tobacco of a pipe. So, for those two reasons, smoking a pipe is not very addictive. So, it can be more of a hobby, and you can think of it more as an art than a habit. Same thing for cigars. You don't inhale smoke from a cigar. Um, so, there's more of an aesthetic quality. Again, we go back to what is the person trying to convey? If a person smokes a pipe, what does that say about them? Well, then you have to think about what the pipe means. What does the pipe mean to them, particularly? But what does a pipe mean in general? Well, there's a certain austerity to it. There's a certain level of class. You can think of the style of the pipe specifically. Are they smoking a pipe because of Sherlock Holmes or some other uh, thought about um, status or wealth or anything like that? You cross reference that with the style of the pipe, the the personality information that you're getting from the person based off of other things, and so basically paraphernalia and accessories, they can tell you a host of different things, and they bleed into just like everything else. Everything else. What can you use to see what an employer wants? Literally manipulation. How do you find the right words to say for a job based off of a bit of conversation? Like the look on the employer's face after question answer right or wrong. Okay, so uh, to pull a quote from Bruce Lee, be water, my friend. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. Put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Put it into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. So What does that mean? Water flows, it can crash. The the idea is think of water as the substance that follows the path of least resistance. You Rivers flow the way they do because at one point when the water was flowing, though the dirt in some areas was weaker than the dirt in the others, so the water naturally went to the weaker dirt and pushed it out of the way to make this curvy, squiggly line of a river. So, in that way, if you're getting a bad reaction from something you said, you don't continue that thought, you don't continue that tone, you don't continue that theme of question or answer or um, sentiment, I guess, any further. You leave it be and you try something else. And if you get a good reaction, you continue with that. It's just uh, it it's shaping in reverse. Look up Bandura shaping. It's a form of conditioning, but think of it in reverse. You're approximating your own behavior based off. You're getting to an ideal behavior based off of successive approximate rewards of successive approximations. In this case, the rewards that you're looking for are the reactions that your boss is giving you. So you're looking for what he wants to hear. Pipe means gay, says Fiji water bottle. That's very mature of you. Also, gross generalization, which is not conducive for what we do as deductionists. How do you account for fashion styles in your deductions? For example, yesterday I wore a grunge style outfit with a super cute varsity jacket, and tomorrow I'm wearing a Burberry trench coat. I found both at a thrift shop, and one makes me look rich, and the other makes me look like a teen. Also, I'm totally using my question to flex my Burberry trench coat. Weird flex. Okay. Not really. It was just, anyway. So, this is why you don't want to look at people in a bubble. You want to you want to observe in context. How does the person purport themselves, not only through their clothing, but through their body language and through their vocabulary and their sentence structure. People purport themselves in many, many different ways. So you see the overlaps in between all those different ways in an abductive fashion, and then you extrapolate from those the common factors, and then you sort of do a pseudo factor analysis and figure out what's the common theme, and from there you get your conclusion about the person. So if I was observing you for across multiple days, the change in aesthetic would show an eclectic personality. It would show someone who is how would I word it? Not setting themselves in a particular box, so that lends itself to openness. Um, you're experimenting with your own appearance, and you don't want to fall into a routine, which would show a lack of conscientiousness. So, I'm using personality metrics to get a general idea based just solely off of the fact that you're changing complete aesthetics over the course of time. But if I was to observe you long enough, maybe I'd find that those aesthetics do have some commonalities. There's some common factors between the grunge and the trench coat. In a way, they're both a bit outrageous. They're both a bit flashy. Um, and then there's the materials. You said you got them both from a thrift shop, so that suggests your socioeconomic status. And so you see how I am continuously pulling on this thread and getting further and further and further. Have you used graphology for deductive purposes? Not really. Uh, You can use handwriting analysis for mentalist tricks. There are a few ones that are pretty easy to do, but as far as deduction, I took a forensics class in high school, and we did have a module on graphology. It was interesting, but the most interesting part about it is how much variance there is to it. Jordan's old. Uh, you make me feel sad, Doc Fawcett. I'm only 19. I only was just allowed to vote last year. Leave me alone. Getting love you, mate. Live long and prosper. Oh, thank you. You need to get out of my head. Haha. Good deduction, though. 90% right. Yeah, it's just based off of a couple of sentences, as well as, just, reviewing the way you phrase your questions and your sort of eccentric nature and the fact that you're sort of manic in the way that you type out your questions and you ask a lot of them. So again, eclectic, eccentric, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, uh, what? You're way young. I thought you were at least 20. Mm, I'm glad people think I'm older. Okay, guys. I'm gonna call quits on this. It's been 2 hours, and I have to wake up tomorrow early. So, um, final goodbyes. What are your recommendations for good books for a beginner? I'm reading Mastermind by Maria Konnikova. That is a fantastic book. Another fantastic book to read directly after that is The Monographs. Maria Konikova's book gives you a good understanding of the psychology behind deduction. The Monographs gives you a good understanding of the practicality of deduction. After that, I would say read What Everybody Is Saying by Joe Navarro, and the definitive book on body language by Barbara and Alan Pease. And those are some good ones to get started with. And then after that, you can sort of pick and choose what you want to read. Those will give you the basics. I need to leave and check my house for spies. What is this wizardry from the Deductionist? Also, Nightmate. Good stream, do them more often. Yes, this is the sort of thing that you do as a Deductionist. Allow me to be an example of the least impressive thing you can be. I don't know. Okay. Bye, Jordan. Night for me as well. Sleep well. Same for all y'all in the chat. Grand day to y'all wherever you are. Good night. Thank you for the live. Have a good night and hope to sleep well. Thank you for explaining gray matter for me and simplifying it for me. I appreciate it. Take care, dude. All right. Cheers, you guys. Have a good night. I'll see you later. So, thanks for watching and arrivederci. Yes, I do want to end it.